Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Gayle Carson. Welcome to Living Regret Free, a program that shows you how to live a better and more joyful life. As an added bonus, I invite you to listen to an introduction to my Mindset Matters program, which ties into this so well. Go to www.sobmindset.com. It's free, and I know you will enjoy it. If you'd like to contact me personally, drop me a line at gaylecarson13@gmail.com or go to my website, www.spunkyoldbroad.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter. My guest today is Kimberly Faith. She's a systems thinking expert, futurist, and thought leader, and the author of the award-winning book, Your Lion Inside, Discover the Power Within and Live Your Fullest Life. Her podcast, The Sisterhood Report, is a leadership portal for women to connect the dots between past, present, and future. She's trained and coached over 30,000 leaders from Fortune 500 companies and translated her coaching experience into a system known as Breakthrough Branding, and now offers an online course to inspire leaders to take ownership of their own signature personal brand. Welcome, Kimberly, to the show.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I can tell you that I'm really interested in what you have to say, especially about this new book that you've come out with. But much of your work is about helping women step out of their sense of smallness and into the confidence of owning their own personal power. And of course, I've believed in that all of my life, but I was brought up like that. My mom said, never let a man support you, be able to earn your own dollars and so forth. So what inspired you?
What was interesting is I lived with my Italian mother-in-law, Rose, when she was 99 and 100. And whenever I would come home coaching other women from corporations from around the world, Rose would always ask me, do they really pay you to do those things, Kim? I would have never had the confidence to do that. She could not conceive of the fact that that was the way things were now. She was born in 1916. And then I would hear this confidence conversation from her, and then I would have a confidence conversations with female executives now. And all of a sudden I realized that we might be carrying some of those outdated ideas left over from the early 1900s.
Well, interesting. My mom was born in 1910, and to this day, even though she's no longer with us, she was really a mentor to me. And she lived to 99 and a half, so kind of a similar story to your mother-in-law. But even though my mother never worked, she was always a homemaker. She did go to work when my sister went to college and while I was in college. And then when we finished school, she stopped working. She did that to help us through. She always stressed the fact of independence, which I'm very fortunate about. And both my sister and I are very successful in what we've done. So, why you say though she inspired your book, Your Lion Inside. So how did she do that?
Well, what was interesting is the fact that we thought we had really made it. We'd come pretty far as women. And it wasn't until I was doing a lot of coaching that I kept seeing these same 7 belief systems bubble up from women from around the world. And I was like, what is this about? And when I mapped out the fact that there were the same 7 that kept showing up, I was shocked to find out that we had done a lot of work as women externally, going after the right to vote, going after women's rights, all of those things. But there were still some internal mindsets. Not everyone had the fortune to be raised by a strong woman like yourself. I read your bio and I was inspired myself. Wow.
Well, thank you for that. But, it is interesting. For example, that in other countries, we have women who are leaders, who are the presidents or the prime ministers. And here we haven't gotten to there yet. So you say that, I love this, and I really want to hear your explanation. You said the glass ceiling may also be a mirror. And I'm assuming that it's because when you look in the mirror, you don't see yourself rising to the top. But what's your explanation?
Actually, what I believe is that I found out that there had been a little bit of an element of victimhood that had tap danced into our subconscious without us even realizing it. And I found that as women kept looking outside of themselves for the answers, the system needed to change, the company needed to change. I agree with all of those things. But I found out that when women began to change their internal language, and we worked through that transformation, in your reflection is the answer you seek. I saw women that I worked with changing their perspective, and I saw them increase their salaries by 51%, 66%. It was really quite staggering to watch.
So when you say from a different perspective, exactly what are you talking about?
So, for example, one of the issues that come up sometimes for women is this belief system that I am not qualified enough, when in fact they are. Studies show that, women will apply for a position only when they have almost 100% of the qualifications, and men will apply when they have barely 60%. And so part of this perspective is about shifting away from I am not qualified enough to saying I am the right one for the opportunity. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, because when I teach negotiation, I give that example of men and women, that
Yes.
women, if they don't have every single thing that's listed in the job description, they don't apply. And men, if they even have just one of them, will apply and figure what the heck, might as well just try. So I
Right.
totally agree with you on that. So
Well, and what's interesting is this all was a kind of tap dancing under the subconscious. As soon as women realized, oh gosh, this belief is here, and I didn't even realize I was acquiescing to it. It was like they were carrying someone else's burden. And when they opened up and said, okay, I don't have to carry that anymore, I just saw that the whole new world would open up for them.
Well, I think that's absolutely terrific, and I think it's wonderful that you're teaching this. But you say that people who are consciously identifying as pro equality or pro woman, how can they look deeper to find out if, for example, subconscious programming is in alignment with or fighting with their conscious efforts? Does that go back to what you just said about thinking about your qualifications for a job?
It does, but it certainly goes deeper. So you're tap dancing in an issue that I love to dive into. So the reality is that I found out that we have come a long way as women. And so you having a mom that's been around for that long, not many people like you and I have had a chance to be around, a centenarian. We made a lot of progress, but we still have a long ways to go. And what I've discovered after researching and writing this book is that we've actually, as women, in some cases, have been played for someone else's agenda. So, for example, do you know the story of Edward Bernays and Torches of Freedom in the 1929?
I do not.
Fantastic story. Edward Bernays is sometimes called the father of PR, and he found out that he was working with a tobacco company, and he said, how do we begin to have more people buy cigarettes? He crafted a flawless plan for a group of women to walk down Fifth Avenue in New York during a major parade, smoking cigarettes. And when they were interviewed about it, they said they were smoking cigarettes because they were torches of freedom, tied into the whole women's movement about the women's right to vote. Isn't that fascinating?
That is fascinating. Unfortunately, got people hooked on cigarettes, but it's really fascinating. You're right.
Well, it is. And what was so interesting, though, is that I found out as I mapped out the history is that we've been played as a collective group of women time and time again. And so part of it is us learning what is really true and what is not true, and not just simply buying on to this whole thing about, all right, the women's movement, because I'm beginning to find we might have been a little more manipulated than we expected.
Oh, I'm sure we were. And you talk about from the suffragette to the Me Too movement.
I do.
Your through line about women that you most want people to recognize and understand that as we celebrate this 100th anniversary of women having the right to vote in the United States. But you are saying, what is that through line?
Well, what I believe is that if 1920 was about the right to vote, then 2020 is about claiming the right to use our voice. It's about actually claiming that voice. And so whether it's us speaking up at a county council meeting about the way education needs to roll out this fall due to COVID, or whether it's actually taking a very active role in repealing the 1947 National Security Act. All of those, and that was an act originally designed to protect the country, but it's now become something that's covered up the abuse of women, children, and military personnel. So whatever it is, it's about claiming that voice that we have to speak up and understand that our perspective is so powerful and so important.
Yeah, you say in the 100 years since then, we haven't really made much progress in how we think about and treat women. And you're suggesting we need to make a meaningful shift. And I think we've had progress And people say
Yes.
not enough, but then again, men have been out there in the working world far longer than we have. Not that that's an excuse, but what do you think that we should do?
Well, what happens is that everything in the world has been created through the lens of history. And I call that the lens of his story. So every workplace norm, every society rule, every practice that we have has all been through that lens. Now, please know that I coach men and women all over the world with companies like Microsoft and Amazon, GE, and I have a profound respect for both. So I want to make that clear because sometimes people jump to the biases of wondering if I believe that or not. What I do believe, though, is that it's time for us to also look through everything with a new lens, through the lens, I call it, of her story, because her story always evolves into our story. It's very, very powerful. And so are you familiar with Jennifer Hyman from the Rent the Runway?
Well, I know of it. I can't tell you I know it deeply.
Fascinating story about her. A few years ago, she was recognized that she had accidentally created a two-tier level of employees, exempt and non-exempt. And when someone was asking her about maternity leave, it struck her about, why did I create this? Well, she said, what I did is I followed the best practices of all the other companies that were out there. And all of a sudden, it hit me one day that I was actually perpetuating this inequality, that it wasn't best practices. It was time for us to evolve past that. And what she did is she completely changed her small company of 1,200 employees, where everybody became the same. And she got rid of this two-tier system and wrote a passionate letter to the New York Times, inviting everyone to please elevate the world and see it differently. And to me, that was a wonderful example of what her story looks like. It's not just doing the same old thing that we've done in the past. It's literally reinterpreting everything that we've accepted as normal. Does that resonate?
Well, I totally agree with that. And I think that a lot of change is going to happen because of what we're going through right now.
Yes.
And it's going to be interesting to see how people shake out of this, because it's going to take creativity and innovation. And we have things coming up with artificial intelligence and robotics,
yes,
et cetera, that people haven't even thought about yet. But you also talk about how we need to rewrite and reimagine the systems that we rely on day to day.
Yes. Yes.
So what do you mean by that? Are you talking about
Sure.
examples of like what we've spoken about, or are there other things that are involved in this?
I could talk about this all day long, I'll be honest with you, but I'll pick just one. So what I believe is that every single industry needs to be reimagined by women and to take a look and not just do what's always been done. So for example, healthcare, okay? So each group of women in every industry has their expertise of their industry. And we had been trained. I mean, been there myself, I'm sure you have, where we really just became almost feminine versions of men in the way we operated in the world. That was the way the rules were for a while. Now what needs to happen is, how do we reimagine it all? So for example, healthcare. Let's just talk about COVID. I was very, very disturbed early in COVID to hear of the number of hospitals that when someone was dying, that a loved one could not be with them. And to me, how is that a humane aspect of healthcare? And so I would really invite everyone to say, wait a minute, why are we redoing it that way? Because we keep saying science, 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 but what we've lost sight of is the humanity side, the heart side of being a human.
Well, that's true. And I understand why they did it, because they didn't really understand COVID in the beginning, and they really didn't understand what it could do. And they were trying to protect people who were not already COVID positive. So, but as we have seen, people who are COVID free still are not doing what they're supposed to do. So it hasn't really had that major an impact.
But I want to.
Yeah.
But think about the humanity of it. I mean, if my husband, okay, if it had been my husband, and I read so many stories, if it had been my husband, I would have signed whatever I had to sign to be there beside them when they passed. I mean, my mother-in-law, we lost her 3 weeks after this started. She had not seen her son, and I mean, since she had been with us for 13 years. And so for 3 solid weeks, she did not understand why we weren't there. I mean, this is her only son. And we were very blessed at the end that he happened to be there waving outside of the window with her last few breaths. They let him come in and he was there for a few minutes. But I think about how we have lost the sight of humanity. And that's what I think women can begin to bring up. I have another healthcare example if you're interested. As I told you, I could talk all day long.
Well, let me ask you a couple of other things. You talked
Sure.
about women serving as the cornerstone for change in the workplace and in society, and the healthcare example you just gave certainly is a part of that. And I think, and it's interesting because we are more empathetic. There's no question about that.
Yes.
On the other hand, that is very often seen as a weakness. We are certainly more emotional, which is a positive because we need to be emotional when it comes to certain things, but that's also seen as a negative. So where are you seeing these cornerstones being used?
Well, part of it is us starting to become much more confident that we really don't care anymore if they're seen as weak. Because here's what's happened is we have artificial intelligence that's starting to go awry with people making decisions without any idea or understanding of the unintended consequence. We now have a society that is making science the epitome of all decisions without seeing it through the barometer of a heart or humanity. And so for me, part of that journey has been stepping into my expert status, stepping into my fullness and what I know. And I'm no longer apologizing if I bring up emotion or heart. Those things are part of why our society is so out of balance right now. If you just look at technology alone, I think about systems as if I was standing here lifting up a weight. Okay, I had a barbell in my hand. And systems operate best when there's a balance. So if I saw tech on one side of my barbell and I saw wisdom on the other, then I would function well and you have the best of all worlds. But what's happening is we have placed so much emphasis on tech that side of the weight now is overwhelming and it's toppling us. We're losing our way and we're losing our wisdom to be able to use that.
That's interesting. And I do agree that we need a blend of both. But you, Miss Kimberly, are a systems thinking expert. And that is very technically oriented. And it's a term that's familiar to people in corporate structures, but you're using that in both corporate and personal settings to facilitate change. So how are you doing that?
Well, when I talk to leaders, first of all, we have to demystify this whole F word that we all hate, feelings. And I'm watching, to be honest with you, I am watching corporations shift from this. Our desire as a society to shut down that feeling center, to not acknowledge the feelings, has simply buried problems that bubble up later on in the organization. And so I've watched companies like GE, like Microsoft, other companies that are starting to tap into, what do I do with this F word? Because when we keep ignoring it, what's happening, it's festering and it's creating toxic workplaces. And toxic workplaces tie into companies not being able to perform. And so this is a performance issue. Let me just take the soft side out of this. This is a performance issue. There was a recent study that said that the number one predictor of high-performing teams is psychological safety. We cannot create psychological safety unless we start addressing these feelings. And I believe women are uniquely suited to provide leadership in that arena.
Well, I agree with you there. And I think, it's interesting how even what we're going through now with Zoom meetings is affecting all of this.
Yes.
In the beginning, everybody was mortified when their kids ran into the room or so forth. And I have two cats that decide, in fact, they haven't arrived yet today, but somehow they always seem to come in the middle of my radio broadcast.
Of course.
And the thing is, on my Zoom meetings, you'll see a cat walking across the screen, or you'll see one in my lap, or, different things. And the interesting thing is now, corporations are saying, we don't care. We know that your kid's going to run in the room. We know your dog is going to bark. We know all of these things. We just want to get the work done. And I think that's come a long way since we started this in March, because people are saying, what are you going to do? You got kids home, you got animals, things are going to happen. So I think that has changed a lot too. And it'll be interesting to see what we go back to. And I know we are not going back to the form in corporations that we've had, because people are liking working from home, maybe not 5 days a week, but at least 2 or 3 days a week. Companies are saying everybody can be virtual if they want to be, certain companies. So how can we as women owning our personal power impact personal branding for business owners?
Sure. So I'm a big proponent. I understand what it's like to walk in a world that's been seen through the lens of men for all these years. I've been there. I've done that. That's very, very important that we're cognizant, because there are strengths of both men and women. Okay, so it's very important that there are strengths of both. The focus of what men do so well is that they're very focused, and they can achieve incredible things. Women have the ability to be able to say, yes, but there's a host of unintended consequences down the road if we don't make some different decisions. And so when it comes to branding, I have two specific tips for your listeners. First of all, keep track of impact numbers. Impact numbers about what it is that you do in your work world. How many lives have you touched? How many industries have you worked with? How many deals have you closed? Keep track of impact numbers, because numbers speak volumes to men. And so when we give numbers about how we've had the impact or the project that we're working on, and then we add what we're talking about, the feelings and the unintended consequence, it has more power. So that's tip number one. And then the second tip is to be sure that you're very clear about owning and articulating your value. I talk a lot about that in the book, and I call it, it's when you first introduce yourself. How do you declare your credibility right then? So when I first meet a group, I say it has been my privilege to train or coach over 30,000 leaders with people from 33 countries spanning 24 industries. Bam. You see where I'm going?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's talk about, because we only have less than 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure people know how to reach you, and I want you to tell them a little bit about your book, and I don't know if you have a gift for them. So let's get all of that done. I want to make sure that all gets in. So where can they find you, Kimberly?
So first of all, they can find things about the book at yourlioninside.com that will tell them where they can purchase the book. It's also available in Audible, which has some extra interviews of the women who are actually featured in the book. And at Your Lion Inside, they can download what I call an inspiration guide. It's a printable guide which shows you the 7 belief systems that tend to show up for women, and how to be able to work your way up towards the zone of freedom is what I call it. And that's complimentary. I wanted to make sure that even if women could not buy the book, this one handout alone could fundamentally change their life.
Fantastic. And if people wanted to reach you?
They can reach me, Kim, at KimberlyFaith.com, or find me on LinkedIn. I do a lot on LinkedIn since I work with a lot of corporations.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, I think if you're listening to this, you should definitely think about getting this book, Your Lion Inside. It is a wonderful book. And as you can tell from Kimberly's interview, she really has it together when it comes to where women should be, how they fit in, the things that they should do, etc. So I strongly recommend getting the book as well. And of course, if you can't do that for some reason, then download the free 7 tips that she has for you, because that's important as well. So we have only 2 minutes left. What have we not covered, Kimberly, that you want to tell our audience?
I want to suggest for all of us as women to stop apologizing. A recent study showed that women have actually a lower threshold for what they consider offensive. And then add that to the years that we've been ingrained in us to apologize. We're not born that way. It's conditioned behavior. And so anytime you feel compelled to have that word come out of your mouth, pause just a moment and find out where did that come from, and redirect it. And I also wanted to say to you that I'm just so impressed and so appreciative of your light in the world for guiding people to see themselves in a new reality. And thank you so much for having me as a part of that journey.
Wow, how nice of you to say that, Kimberly. Yeah, it's interesting to me. When you're born into this world, a lot of it has to do, of course, with your parents. I was fortunate. I had 2 great parents. My father was an entrepreneur. He was a pharmacist, and he was in a little tiny town. He was like the town doctor, if you know what I'm saying, way back when.
Yes.
And so I was raised in a family where the father worked and the mother stayed home. But as I told you, she was always getting us, we had to do the dance lessons. We had to do the piano lessons. We had to do certain things, to raise us up. And there was never any question about us going to college. I never wanted to go to college. All I ever wanted to do was work and have a career. And she said, no, you're going to college. And I said, no, I'm not. And we went through a few things, but then I ended up going to college, and I even have a doctorate. But Even though I was kind of the black sheep of the family, I was fortunate with the parents that I have, and also the sister that I have. I mean, my sister is very successful as well, so I'm just very fortunate with my entire family. So I just want to say, Kimberly, I think you're shining a light in the world, and I want everybody to get a copy of this book. It is so good. I mean, Your Lion Inside. I mean, you won an award. You got the Indie Discovery Award winner. You were an annual National Indie Excellence finalist. Discover the power within and live your fullest life. Kimberly Faith, thank you so much for being with us today. We have really enjoyed it.
Thank you very kindly. Look forward to what else, all the goodness that you keep creating in the world.
Hi, this is Dr. Gayle, and I wanted you to know I have a whole bunch of other things to offer you. If you go to spunkyoldbroad.com, you will see an array of SOB stuff for sale and all our latest products and additions. If you're interested in getting on TV, I have a brand new course, Get on TV. And if you want to start your own business, you'll want my SOB Guide to Business Success. I know you'll love them all. I guarantee it.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's show. I choose my guests carefully, so if you have someone you'd like me to interview, please drop me a line at GayleCarson13@gmail.com. In the meantime, check out my intro program, Mindset Matters, at www.sobmindset.com. See you next week.